forgot to hit
Well,
record.
we're in North Florida. Don't talk to gangsters here, we're in North Florida. So as we're getting there, we're going to lay the groundwork a little bit. Okay? So remember that we're going back to the 1930s. The Great Depression is in full swing. The economy is bad, times are hard, people are hard up. This was fertile breeding ground, what we became known as the gangster era. Okay? So by the time that this event took place, the gangster era was on its way out. Most of your big name gangsters, Al Capone, Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd, Bonnie and Clyde, etc., are either dead or in prison. So this was the last hurrah, if you will, of the gangster era. Okay? So one of the last gangs was the Barker Karpus gang. They were known for being one of the longest lasting gangs. They were also among the most meticulous, most clever, and in some ways most violent. That's saying something in the gangster era. So where does the background start? We're going to roll back to September 1892. On that month and year, George Barker marries, ready for this name, Arizona Donnie Clark. Later known as Arizona Donnie Clark Barker. Later known as Kate Barker. Later known as Ma Barker. But when she was married, her official name was Arizona Donnie Clark Barker. She married George. Okay? The marriage would bear 4 sons between 1896 and 1902. In order of age, Herman was the eldest. Then Lloyd, then Arthur, and then lastly Fred. Fred was born in 1902. So all of the boys were in trouble from the beginning. But again, think of the era. It's the gangster era. Crime is running rampant. At young age, the boys were involved in petty boyhood crime, shoplifting, theft, etc. In and around Tulsa, Oklahoma, the boys became involved in a local group called the Central Park Gang. Again, just basically a bunch of teenage hoodlums. But this was the beginning. They were in and out of trouble with law enforcement. But as far as their parents go, George was a pretty simple guy. FBI records regard him as shiftless. Okay, held a few low-end menial jobs. Kate, simple woman, but had a penchant for the finer things like finer clothes, finer furniture, etc., etc. So Kate was always covering for the boys. They'd get in trouble, Kate would speak on their behalf, bail them out. Okay? Now we're going to start your real-time travel back as you're leaving these modern roads behind, and we're going back to 1935. Okay? So keep your eyes open. You may still see some of the deer hanging out along the side of the field. Okay? So after the Central Park Gang, Herman, the oldest, went into kind of a life of crime on his own, and eventually fell in with a group called the Kynes Terrell Gang. Okay? He was arrested for highway robbery in prison, was released, went back into his life of crime. By 1927, his criminal career comes to an end. During a robbery, he got involved in a gun battle with law enforcement officers, fatally wounded one of the police officers. They tracked Herman Barker down. He was cornered. Rather than be taken alive by the police, he turned his weapon on himself and took his own life. So in 1927, Herman Barker is dead. The other Barker sons were all involved in lives of crime, and by the mid-1920s, were all in prison in various locations. Lloyd was in Leavenworth. Arthur was in an Oklahoma prison. Fred Barker was in a Kansas State penitentiary. By 1928, this is the end of the line for the Barkers' marriage. George Barker, either by his own choice or by Kate kicking him out, he would no longer support the lives the boys had, and he stepped out of the picture. Right? Now Kate is alone. She's living in a dirt-floored shack, unemployed by herself. But things started to look up around the spring of 1931. Fred Barker gets paroled and released from prison and comes home. Kate has also started living with a guy named Arthur Dunlop. Both of them are unemployed, but at least she's not by herself anymore. While Fred was in the Kansas State Penitentiary, he met another inmate named Alvin Karpus. Fred got released first, Alvin Karpus later. The two teamed up again once they were on the outside, and they started forming a criminal organization that took the name of, wait for it, the Barker Karpus Gang. But the two sat up all night coming up with names. So how their criminal organization started. That would start from small crimes, would grow up into robbery, etc. And they started getting into bigger time problems. They pulled off a couple of store robberies, but on one of them, their vehicle was spied by the night marshal of Pocahontas, Arkansas, who approached the vehicle. He was apprehended by Alvin Karpus and Fred Barker, driven some distance away, shot and killed. There's that tree. About a month later, they did another store robbery in West Plains, Missouri.
Baby deer out there.
Got spied by their vehicle was identified when they pulled into a gas station to fix a couple of flat tires. And they were reported the local sheriff approached them. And as he approached the vehicle, Fred Barker stepped from the vehicle, unloaded, and killed him. Now they'd gone down 2 law enforcement officers. Now they were much more in the headlines. They stepped up into bank robberies. During 2 of these major bank robberies, they killed 3 policemen and wounded a 4th one in 2 separate incidents.
You guys' house for 1935.
They're up on you. They're way up on the radar now. They're above just petty crimes now. And from there, our story will begin. We will pick up once we stop. Yeah, I've heard some crazy stories.
Yeah, I watched the YouTube videos. It's haunted as fuck.
Okay, now, if anybody wants to stay seated while I babble, you're more than welcome to do so.
We'll give you a little spill before we actually go.
Okay, so we covered the background that led on the drive over. We covered the background that led to the start of the Barker Karpus gang. Okay? They went up, from petty theft to robbery to bank robbing, and now murder of law enforcement officers on top of that. So now they're kind of way up on the radar. Okay? But what really started the downfall of the gang, and what begs the question, we're talking crimes that are happening in the upper Midwest, some of them in rural areas. We're talking St. Paul and Minneapolis, where most of their major heists were happening. So that's a long way from, look around, we're in North Florida. That's a long way from St. Paul and Minneapolis. So what would bring one of the worst gangster era gangs here to rural North Florida? Well, the downfall of the gang really started when they decided to kind of shift gears a little bit from robbery and theft and bank robbery, because yeah, it's a big haul when you rob a bank, but you're running the risk of shootouts with law enforcement officers, which is how they ended up killing those 3 officers and wounding the 4th one. Okay? They were responding to the bank robberies. Okay? So they decided they were going to take another approach. They decided, let's go after kidnap for ransom. We'll still get a big haul, but we'll avoid the potential gun battle with law enforcement officers. So they pulled off 2 major kidnapping heists. The first one excuse me, came around April of 1934. The first one they pulled off was the Ham kidnapping. Now, William Ham Jr. was the son of William Ham Sr., owner of a major brewery and a very prominent citizen in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area. Okay? So they abduct him. He's held for ransom for $100,000. The family pays it, and he's released unharmed. Federal authorities got a break in this case, okay, because newfound technology played a hand. At this time, fingerprinting typically had to be done on harder surfaces. Okay? But they had come up with this newfangled technology called silver nitrate, which could be put on different surfaces. And the only thing they had to really link them to find who the perpetrators were was the ransom notes. Well, they dusted these ransom notes with what they call silver nitrate. It reacts with perspiration on the skin, and there on the ransom notes was clear fingerprints. Now, by this time, the Barker Karpus gang has grown, and at points they had almost up to 25 people on it at one point. So now they had a definitive lead because they matched those fingerprints to members of the Barker Karpis gang, and they knew they had a connection to who was involved. But again, he was released unharmed. Okay? Now, skip ahead 7 months. Okay? Excuse me, that first kidnapping was in April 1933. Skip ahead to January 1934. They pull off another kidnapping. Okay? This time, it's a gent named Edward Bremer, a wealthy St. Paul banker and business owner. And unfortunately for the Barker Karpis gang, his dad had a lot of political connections and was a close personal friend of a guy named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was sitting in the White House at the time. Well, this kidnapping put them way up on the radar. Because the authorities got another break at this time, because remember, the Barker Karpis gang, as I said before, was very clever and very meticulous. Because they were known for very clever planning. They were thorough. To avoid having to pull into a gas station and fuel up and risk being seen and identified, they would stage fuel stops along the way. They would stage fuel cans in certain places along their route, stop and fuel up and not have to enter a gas station. Okay? A discarded gas can was found on the side of the road. Now, how it was found, accounts vary. Some say it was a local farmer. Others say it was a law enforcement, a local police officer. But either way, they found the gas, dusted it for fingerprints. Earlier, Arthur Barker, one of the Barker sons who I mentioned earlier, was already in prison at this time, was paroled and became an active member of the Barker Karpis gang. Authorities pulled one of his fingerprints off that gas can. They knew they had a connection to the Barker Karpis gang now. The heat really turned up. There were also reports, still unconfirmed, that there's a lot of conflicting detail came up around the Barker Karpis gang over the years. And there was reports that J. Edgar Hoover, in charge of the Bureau of Investigation, was told basically by FDR himself, hey, bring the Barker Karpis gang to justice. The heat, whether that really happened or not, whether he had that face-to-face with FDR, nobody's really sure. Records conflict. But either way, the pressure really started turning up on the Barker Karpis gang. So they scattered in an attempt to lay low. They got almost $300,000 in these 2 kidnappings. They split it up among themselves, tried to money launder it where they could, but the gang scattered to try and get off law enforcement radar. Some of them went as far away as Cuba. Others scattered to different parts of the U.S. Okay? That brings us to our Florida connection. Okay? Several members of the gang showed up at the El Commodore Hotel in Miami, Florida in September of 1934. They are going by aliases. There's a George Sumners, a T.C. Blackburn, a Mrs. G.R. Ryan. Who do these people turn out to be? Alvin Karpis, Harry Campbell, Fred Barker, and Kate Barker. By this time, she has kind of adopted the term Kate and was more and more becoming known as Ma, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay? So they go in, these members are now staying at the El Commodore Hotel in Miami. Alvin Karpis and his lady friend only stayed there a few days, left for Havana, Cuba. Now staying at the hotel is gang member Harry Campbell, Fred Barker, and Kate Barker. During their stay there, Fred Barker approaches the hotel manager saying, hey, where can I find a nice, quiet, little secluded country place where me and my mom can go spend some quality time? Okay? Well, Joe Adams, the hotel manager, said, I think I can help you with that, because a friend of his, Carson Bradford, who owned a dog kennel and a racing track in Miami, he said he owns a little white cottage, a little country cottage up in North Florida. So Adams approaches Carson Bradford, the house owner, and said, hey, I got somebody willing to rent your house. Well, he started entertaining the idea, but Mrs. Bradford apparently didn't warm up to it and originally declined the offer and said, don't rent it to him. Well, the Barkers, using their aliases, counteroffered and said, hey, we'll pay you almost 3 times what the normal month's rent would be, and we'll pay you several months in advance. But remember, we're talking 1930s Depression era. So Bradford kind of rethought and went, okay. So he rented the house to the Blackburns. On November the 7th, 1934, the Blackburns, a mother and son pair, move into this white cottage on the lake. Now, this land had been bought by the Bradfords in around 1890. This house was built in 1930. So by this time it's been standing about 4 years. Okay? Never been rented before. So this couple moves in. They blend in well with the local community. Now, anybody who's ever done any historical research or even just personal experience, if I asked all of you here to explain an event to me, I'd get a dozen different interpretations of it. So interpretations varied from the townspeople in Ocklawaha, what it was like, who was living in their midst. It was just, to them it was just a quiet mother-son pair. They kept to themselves a lot. Fred Barker and his alias was T.C. Blackburn made some friends and went hunting in the Ocala National Forest with them. Kate Barker started going to one of the churches in Ocklawaha. She made a few friends. Some people said they kept to themselves. Some said they were fairly active in the community. Then the peculiarities started to show up. Reports vary as to how extreme these were. The ones that seemed to have the most validity, Kate Barker would go down to the church and she'd leave what was considered for that day unusually large offerings in the offering plate. She was reported sometimes of going down to the local store, buying a few items, handing the shopkeep a $20 bill. Like a $20 bill in this day and age? Reported the guy sometimes had trouble making change for it. And there were also reports, some people said nobody ever came and went from that house. Others said people would come and go at weird hours. There was always a car left around with a full tank of fuel. Now, how would they know this? But by and large, the Blackburns settled into Ocklawaha, fairly well blended in and didn't draw a lot of attention to themselves. Yes, other stories circulated that I gave a little bit of, this is where some of the myth starts to come in. That they were tipped off because Fred Barker would have a habit of going out on the dock behind the house and hunting ducks with a Thompson machine gun. Not a good way to keep yourself off the radar. But be that as it may, they settle into Ocklawaha in November 1934. Now, how did they get found here? We're a long way from St. Paul, Chicago, Minneapolis, etc., etc. What finally brought them here were events that happened hundreds of miles away from here. One of them is debated whether it was actually a link in the chain or not. It could have been, because one of the gang members, a guy named Fred Getz, aka George Shotgun Ziegler, had a tendency to be a little bit of a bragger. And he started bragging that he was the brains behind the kidnappings and the kidnap for ransoms. So, well, that could be a serious liability to the rest of your gang members. So one night he is walking out of his favorite night spot in Cicero, Illinois, and George Shotgun Ziegler gets blasted in the face with a shotgun and killed. They think it was done as a gangland hit to silence him. And on his person, when authorities found him, they found a notebook on his person that had names and addresses of other known gang associates. Whether this was a link in the chain is debated. But skip ahead several months. It's January 1935. On the 8th of January, federal agents have been staking out 2 apartments in Chicago. Earlier in the evening of January the 8th, around 6:30, Arthur Barker walks out of the one apartment with his lady friend and walks smack into the hands of federal agents who've been staking the place out. Arthur Barker is now apprehended. Later that night, around 10:30, that same night, January 8th, 1935, federal agents move in on the other apartment. It is inhabited by 2 gang associates, by 2 gang members, Byron Bolton and Russell Gibson. Their lady friends are also in there with them. Federal agents storm the place. Byron Bolton surrenders. Russell Gibson puts up a fight and is killed in the exchange of gunfire with federal agents. Okay? But they took Byron Bolton prisoner at this time. Interviewing both of these men, Arthur Barker refused to talk. Byron Bolton was a little more loose-lipped, and he basically informed the federal agents that he had overheard a conversation that Arthur Doc Barker was having with presumably Fred Barker, saying that they had wanted to go down to a lake in Florida, that Fred was on a lake in Florida hunting some old alligator named Old Joe. Well, federal agents immediately headed for Florida and began searching for a lake that might have Old Joe. They first arrived in Jacksonville. There were also reports that a lake with Old Joe, that there were 2 lakes they uncovered. One was Lake Wahlberg up in present-day Alachua County near Gainesville on Paynes Prairie State Park. The other was Lake Weir. So a detachment of federal agents come down and starts asking around trying to find this. In the meantime, back up in Chicago, Byron Bolton apparently asked federal agent, hey, can I get a change of clothes? Can you go back to my place and get me some? So a federal agent returned to that apartment. Reportedly, some reports said they had already searched this apartment. Okay? And they missed it on the first try. But anyway, when this agent went back, in the closet, he found a map atlas. And on the Florida map, Lake Weir and Ocala had a circle around it. Another piece of the puzzle. Immediately, more agents came to Florida. They met up with the original group in Ocala and started going out into the countryside, passing mugshots, trying to find their quarry. Okay? Now, reports that actually tracked them to this house, accounts differ. These all might be a part of the puzzle. You know, there's different stories as to how this happened. Again, these all may be pieces of it. Okay? By some accounts, they were recognized that somebody recognized a wanted poster in the post office, and it was Fred Barker. Said, hey, he looks like the guy, that Blackburn guy renting that house down on the lake. Others said they were showing mugshots to the locals who identified, oh yeah, that's the Blackburns. There was one account that Fred Barker and a friend that he made here were out on Lake Weir in a boat, and another boat approached them. There's a similar account that they were not on the lake in a boat, that Fred was on the back dock when the boat approached. Either way, the person in the other boat was a federal agent in disguise. He looked at Fred Barker after this conversation, knew he had at least one of their targets. So now they've got definitive evidence that the Barker Karpis gang is here. Remember, they are here after the Barker Karpis gang. They are not after Kate Barker. We're going to get to her at the end of this, okay? Because right now they can't arrest her. She's not guilty of a crime at this point. But they were here after the Barker Karpis gang. They know they've got at least one. Had they moved in a few days earlier, they would have caught more of the gang. Okay? So now we're going to skip to the main event. Okay? So picture this. Look around. This house is almost exactly the same distance from the lake as its original location. There were no trees around it. Picture this house. A couple of flanking buildings. There was a cottage on one side, small shed on the other. There are a few neighboring houses around it. Okay? It's surrounded by bushes and stately live oak trees, which you'll see on the pictures inside. So it's early, so let's all dial back 88 years. We are now standing here on January 16th, 1935 at 5:30 a.m. It is a cold, chilly winter morning. Okay? At around 5:30 a.m., 14 federal agents arrive on this site. They surround this house in groups of 2 to 4. 2 to 4 over here, 2 to 3 over there. 2 of them are blocking drive lanes at the head of the property to keep passerby from coming down. Okay? They surround this house at about 5:30 in the morning. They are armed and ready. They know the metal of their targets inside. They are armed with tear gas canisters, Thompson machine guns, shotguns, rifles, semi-automatic and automatic pistols. 14 agents in place, and they wait. Just after daybreak, the next stage in this little drama plays out. At just after sunrise, the chief agent in charge, E.J. Connolly, was stationed with 2 or 3 other agents in this area. Now, some accounts vary on this one. Some accounts say that Connolly actually approached this door, knocked on it. Others say he called from out here, got within a few yards of the house and called from outside. We may never really know the answer. Most of the accounts I've spoken that he actually went up and did knock on the door. Kate Barker approached the door. He announced who he was. They had arrest warrants for members of the gang. Send them out. No problem. Kate Barker goes back inside. Connolly steps back in the yard. By some accounts, he went back a second time and possibly a third because no answer, there was no reply. About 15 minutes after he first announced his presence in the house, the agents recalled hearing a voice inside the house say, "All right, go ahead." The agents interpreted that as, "Phew, they're giving up. They're going to walk out." Connolly steps back into the yard and waits. His answer comes from that upstairs bedroom window. A blast of Thompson submachine gun fire comes out of that window. Bullets spray all around Connolly. None of them ever hit him. Now, in their defense, the Thompson machine gun is a bit of a hard weapon to fire. It's short, it's heavy, it kicks like an army mule. By some accounts, if you want to have a better chance of hitting your target, they say aim down at the leg, let the bullets rip up across the body as the kick of the gun pulls it up. At any rate, bullets hit all around Connolly. He ducks for cover, the battle is on. The agents initially responded with tear gas canisters. The tear gas proved ineffective. They weren't able to get them through the windows. They were hitting the sides of the house and bouncing off. So then it came down to a firearms exchange. Now, accounts vary as to what happened over the next several hours. Most accounts agree that for the first 45 minutes, this was an all-out war. The two sides were blasting away at each other. There was reportedly, the first side was moving around window to window. The firing was coming from different locations. At one point, the federal agents realized that there was fire coming from two places almost simultaneously. They knew there had to be at least two people in the house. And others were figuring that one person was running around trying to create the image that there were more people in the house. The fire was coming from multiple locations. Either way, they know they've got at least two persons. The battle continues for 45 minutes, described as an all-out war. Here's where the variables start to come in. After 45 minutes, the grounds go quiet for now. Federal agents later reported that there was 10 to 15 minutes of quiet and something would happen. Something would move at a window. They'd see a figure go by a window. A curtain would blow. Federal agents on one side would open fire at it. Their comrades would hear it. They would open fire. And the exchange would go on for 10 to 15 minutes and go quiet again. And by some accounts, that's how this battle went after the first 45 minutes. There was 10 to 15 minutes of fire, 10 to 15 minutes of quiet. Repeat, 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 repeat. Other accounts say the firing ended after 2 hours and it was dead quiet. The only thing to really validate it or debunk it, either way, is there were reports from town residents in Ocklawaha that they said when they heard the first gunfire go off in this quiet little sleepy town, a bunch of people have never heard machine gun fire in their lives. It caught their attention. They said it was loud and noisy for the first 45 minutes to an hour, and then they reported intermittent fire, 10 to 15 minutes of quiet, 10 to 15 minutes of gunfire, off and on, until 4 hours after the first rounds were fired. Later on, some of the federal agents would relate that they said, actually, now that we think about it, we don't remember getting any return fire after the first 45 minutes. But again, hesitant to stick their head in that door. After 45 minutes, everything goes quiet. Now, during the course of this exchange, some of the federal agents were moving around the outside of the house looking for better vantage points, and by some accounts it was the shed, some say it was the cottage. Either way, they got in that cottage and they found two people hiding in the cottage. The Barkers had hired a local couple, the Woodburys, to take care of the gardening, the cooking, the housekeeping, etc. They were inside the house when the battle started. They managed to eventually escape to a side window, ran for the outbuilding. Okay? The federal agents found them there hiding inside and got them to safety. Whichever the course was after those 45 minutes, 4 hours after the initial rounds are fired, the site goes quiet. Federal agents are still hesitant to stick their head in there. Like I said, they know who's inside, they know their reputation. So they got this idea. Hey, Mr. Woodbury, come over here. So they called Willie Woodbury over, the husband of the couple they hired. Some accounts say he volunteered. He later kind of said, well, the federal agents offered me $20 to do it. Don't know whether it's been hard to validate. Either way, they fit Willie Woodbury with a bulletproof vest and send him into the house. He's in there about 10 minutes, maybe 15. The federal agents are starting to wonder what happened. They didn't hear any gunshots. Did the Barkers abduct him? 10 to 15 minutes afterward, by most accounts, he appeared at that upstairs window and reported that the Barkers were dead. They moved inside the house at this point. Eventually brought the two bodies out. By this time, there's a crowd of onlookers that have gathered from around Ocklawaha. And so they eventually brought the bodies out and the small arsenal they found in there. They found 2 Thompson machine guns, 3 bulletproof vests, 2 shotguns, 1 lever-action rifle, assorted semi-automatic and automatic pistols, and boatloads of ammunition. So the gun battle was now over. Okay? Again, a lot of conflicting reports about this. Federal agents counted around 700 bullets they had fired into it. I've also read FBI accounts where they estimated they fired 1,500 rounds during the course of this battle. Not all of them may have hit the house, but I've seen official FBI records that said they've discharged about 1,500 rounds of ammo. Okay? Either way, the battle is over, and at 4 hours in, they enter the house, remove the bodies, and this gunfight was over. For a few days, Ocklawaha was on national headlines all across the country as the place where the Barker Karpus gang members met their end. Okay? You know, this was actually the demise of the Barker Karpus gang. Never again did it function as the full group it was. When the bodies were removed, they were taken to Pyle's Mortuary in Ocala. One of the people here who removed the bodies was a gent named F.L. McGehee. He was the assistant undertaker. His father would F. Lee McGehee would later become the Ocala police chief, and I am indebted to him for a lot of the information I know because he made a study of it, that his stories his dad passed down, and he did research on it, and he was grateful enough to pass some of that information along to me before he passed away. So the bodies went to Pyle's Mortuary in Ocala. Reportedly, the mortuary owner, I've got some of the biggest name gangsters here, and Public Enemy #1, he was supposedly charging 5 cents sometimes to come in and view the bodies. There were also rumors that federal agents wanted them laid out in there and were watching the place in case some of the other gang members showed up to confirm if the Barkers were really dead, and they would apprehend them at the same time. Within a day, the members that are still down in Miami now, Alvin Karpus has returned stateside. He's in Miami. Harry Campbell's in Miami at the El Commodore Hotel with their 2 lady friends. They hear about this and they immediately make a run for it to Atlantic City, New Jersey. They are eventually tracked down in Atlantic City and cornered in a hotel by federal authorities. By some accounts, as the federal agents entered the building, they found a rather startled man. These guys come in carrying all these guns. They startled this guy in the hallway dressed in his underwear, asked him to know where Alvin Karpus is. Oh yeah, he's in the hotel room right down here. Let me go get him. They were talking to Alvin Karpus. Karpus went to his room, alerted Harry Campbell. A gun battle explodes in the hallway. The 2 men escaped. One of their lady friends was wounded. Both of them were left behind. Karpus is eventually run down and apprehended in New Orleans in 1936. But this battle here effectively ended the reign of the Barker Karpus gang. Never again after this did they function as the well-tooled machine that they did. Fred and Kate were killed here. Many others had already been apprehended. The others scattered and just went off the radar. Karpus was eventually captured. But this gun battle here, January 16th, 1935, in a quiet little North Florida town, signaled basically the end of the 1930s gangster era. Okay? Now, before we move inside the house, we'll pause for questions. Okay? When you go inside, a couple things about this house. It is not on the original site. The original site is actually on the north shore of Lake Weir. It was sold in 2016. Up until that time, this house was still owned by the family who rented it to the Barkers in 1935. Okay? So it's been in the same family's hands since then. And they patched all the bullet holes, and it continued to be used as a residence, sometimes as a summer retreat, etc., for many years. Okay? When it was sold in 2016, the land was sold, but the house was offered up to the county and the city, etc., and they said, you just have to move it. Well, that triggered a grassroots effort between the city, the county, citizen support organizations, etc., The money was raised, a local construction company was hired, and they built a 40 by 80 foot metal barge, jacked up this house, rolled it to the lakeshore, put it on the barge, floated it 2 miles across Lake Weir, reversed the process, rolled it up here. It is sitting the same distance from the lake as the original house sat. The trees were not here on Lakeshore. This is a safeguard to keep the house from being so visible from the lake. Okay? But it is the same distance from the lake. It sits a little higher. There had to be some modifications made to it when they moved here. The bottom, correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor, the bottom 2 steps were added?
Yeah, bottom 2 steps were added. The top 4 are original. When you're walking up, if you look at the top left corner at the top step, it has it dated when the house was built.
So you're about to walk in to a time capsule. The furnishings are original. None of the rooms are roped off. It is very much, aside from a few modern additions that have been made, which are very discreet, you are literally walking into a 1930s time capsule. Now, we said we get to the most controversial figure, Kate Barker. What was Kate Barker's role in all of this? Okay? by most accounts, Kate was a pretty simple woman. Yes, she knew what her boys were up to. Okay? Over the years, but she covered for them, she made alibis, she got them out of trouble, etc. But this story started to circulate that Kate Barker was actually involved in the planning of their criminal organizations, that she took part in their heists. Mostly that is probably not true. Kate Barker did travel with them. She was used as a good cover. Hey, look, we're traveling with our mom. We're just a happy traveling family. We're not serious, we're not some of the most notorious gangsters of this day and age. So she provided a good cover story. She cooked for the boys, she cleaned for them, she covered for them when they were kids. But this rumor started that Kate Barker was actually a criminal mastermind, that she helped them plan their heists. She was involved in them. There's some belief that this image was actually either created or at least furthered by the FBI. What at that time was known as the Bureau of Investigation. It didn't have the federal until about 6 months after this battle took place. That the Bureau of Investigation created this image that if Kate Barker was caught, wrong place, wrong time, and here it happened, and was gunned down, it wouldn't look like we just mowed down an innocent civilian. We didn't mow somebody's mom down, that we mowed down a hardened criminal. But if you ask actual members of the Barker Karpis gang, nothing could have been further from the truth. They tried to send Kate to the movies or to other places when their major heists were going down. One of the gang members went so far as to say, look, Mom was a simple woman. She couldn't plan breakfast, let alone a major heist. So over the years, the image of Kate Barker has grown more and more. Hollywood didn't help it any. There were several Hollywood movies made that totally embellished this battle, what she did. They portrayed her as this cigar-chomping, gun-toting person. Now, where did they find her at the end? They were both found in an upstairs bedroom. Fred was found with a semi-automatic pistol in his hand. Kate Barker, matter of conjecture. Some say she was found in the bedroom, some say she was in the hallway. Some accounts said she had a machine gun in her hand. Others said it was laying a few feet away on the floor away from her. We may never know. But by and large, the image of Kate Barker as this criminal mastermind has largely been debunked. Okay, any questions?
Do you know what happened to the family?
Okay, the remaining sons, okay, well, we know Fred died here. All 4 of the Barker sons met violent deaths, okay? Herman, we covered on the drive over here. In 1927, he shoots himself rather than be taken by authorities. Arthur Barker was eventually captured and sentenced to prison in Alcatraz. He and a few other inmates try a prison escape one night. Arthur is gunned down by guards at Alcatraz. That leaves Lloyd. Lloyd was the only one who went straight. He served a 25-year prison sentence in Leavenworth, got released, and he went straight. He moved out to Colorado. Some accounts have him as working as a local store manager. Others say he was a short order cook. Could have actually been both, because think of the day and age, sometimes these little stores had little diners in them. But either way, he's working out in Colorado, going straight. Comes home from work one night, walks up the steps of his house. His wife meets him at the door with a double-barreled shotgun, puts both blasts into his chest, kills him on the spot. She was later committed to an institution until the end of her life. So even though he went straight, sadly Lloyd still met a violent death, just like the other Barker sons did. Okay? Now, again, when we go inside, please remember, you are walking into original house, original furnishings. This is a house frozen in time. So please, look with these, touch with these. Not with these. You're welcome to look at the pictures, but please don't sit in any of the original furniture. We've already had accidents with that. Okay? So if there's no other questions, we'll proceed inside. So these are the original steps. Almost everything in this house is original. So they did remodel the house, I believe around 2004, but they tried to do the remodel keeping the flavor of it.
Yeah, the guy that did that, he said that's not yeah, it has a remote control. It's how it's controlled. So never had one. How old is it on the track on it?
You'll see matching plaster on it. this lamp got missed by gunfire all around it. This window over here was shattered. This lamp actually is a photograph on the table.
Alvin Farkas is reported being the one who helped Charles Manson to play guitar.
There is rumor that they were in prison together.
McNeil Island Penitentiary. They were both sentenced there, and that's happened last year.
That's right.
You'll see gunfire ring all around that man. There's a picture on the table of the damage around it, but it never touched the link. That window over there in the corner was shattered.
So there was no requirement back then to actually take photos of the bodies?
The
They
ones
just killed them?
there were photos taken.
I want to put the whole room.
Get over it. We're gonna go. That's that one there. You can see all the stories. And then there's the one.
It's set up exactly like how it is. That's
There was a bed over there, though, apparently.
Yeah, there's one that has her laying right in front of the
Dude, this
closet.
place is sick. I'd live in a place like this.
Actually, there's the one from the morning. That's when they were.
I like old shit. I think I'm an old soul. I feel
There's
comfortable.
so that they
It's
get
a Tiffany lamp.
I think they got all the kids out. And like the room.
I had one of these off a crackhead once. Cost a lot of money.
Right up there.
I made a lot more money on it.
And then somebody went in there and undid the patching as well. You can do it. But that's whenever they were on the back of the house, and it was just awesome. Straight across the top.
Lead paint. Cardinal glass. My grandmother had a bunch of this that I wanted. They sold it.
Have you seen a picture of that in the car?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen these. It's pretty. For nose all of us.
Pretty modern stove. They're the old light switches. Now that's an ice box. Should we open it? Open it, open it, open it, open it. Hurry, quick. Quick, quick. Alright, cool. Somebody broke the toilet. Nice. I love black and white tile.
This is where the ghost hunters
Tribute to law enforcement. Can opener. Watch your step. Yeah, see, I couldn't live in this house because I'd fall and break all my bones and stuff. You know, I'm old.
Here, look. actually found over here. And from most accounts, the battle started from here. This is where the first rounds were fired. This one's their last.
Whoa. Look at the bullet holes. This is the room they supposedly died in. The front room. Thought this is the one where you get. Oh. This is lead paint. Swapping out as we go, it's all right. Those bullet holes. That's up. Look at this sink. What kind of faucets I want on my tub? Faucets are cool.
That shit fucking rained in here. Yeah. Oh, it's a nice house. Alright, I'm going to bed. I'm surprised. I'm surprised they were able to.
And this being a nice house, consider the day and age. It's
Yeah, they're like
1935.
rich.
This is a 2,100 square foot house, 4 bedrooms, 2 or 3 bathrooms.
Yeah, that's the great thing about old Florida houses. You do not see any two-story houses that are like in Florida anymore.
This is the room they're shot in.
Because that way the hot air can go to the ceiling. And the windows are tall to let the most amount of air come out.
It's that one over there. The room on that side. Because I thought they said they found the body over there. So it was right by this, right where you're standing. That's where Ma Barker's body was found. That original wood. They were buried in. Wow, that's nice.
To answer your question, the bodies lay in a state that is almost 3 months. They lay there from January to
Oh, I had something similar when I was a child. I just really posed in a mirror where somebody died in the same room. Lord forgive me. Oh, wait a minute. Is this the same bed that was in the room?
It's all original.
Not all of it, most of it. Time period accurate. That's a naked woman. Can't show that on TV. I like this vanity. Holly used to have one real similar. Oh, that's pretty. I don't think that's 1930s, but look at that swimsuit.
That's like a shirt.
A bodysuit, that is a swimsuit right on right there. That's a Hurricanes thing. Wow. Very cool. I wonder what's in there. We allowed to open that? Ironing board. Cool.
most of it was
that one already.
This was their arsenal. They took over the house. Two Thompson machine guns.
Touching the walls gangsters did.
Thompson and around.
It's like ceiling surrounding.
Very cool.
That makes sense.